In this video, I'll show you a few tips to get started with VS Code and the Docker container. So I've got my Docker container running. I've got it connected from VS Code. So I can click on this blue button on the bottom left and choose Attach to Running Container, and then choose my Docker container. And so now everything that I'm going to be executing in terms of code is all going to be run inside of the Docker container that I have running. So I created a folder, RSM-MSBA, in my home directory. So the tilde stands for my home directory. And within that, I'm going to create a new directory. And you can do this in a couple different ways. I could either use my regular file browser and create a new directory. I'm just going to do it from the terminal here. So just mkdir GTA 403, let's say. That's my new directory. And so what I want to have is that becomes the base directory for everything I do in VS Code as my main project directory. And so what I'm going to do is I can just click here on Open to open a folder, or I can go into the menu at the top where I can choose File and Open File. You can't see that because I'm on a Mac here, but I can do that. So a couple different ways. I'm just typing Command O on Windows. That would be Control K-O. And so now I'm going to say, instead of having RSM-MSBA as the base, I'm going to choose 403 as the base. All right, so it's quickly refreshing. And now my base directory is mgta 403. Okay, so now I want to add some files to this. And again, I can do that with my File Explorer, or I can just move some data that I happen to have over here. Just going to drag that directly from somewhere else on my file system into this new directory. And I'll get a pop-up from VS Code that says, hey, do you want to copy the data in there? Yeah, let's do that. So we can just take entire directories and then drag them into the file browser or the Explorer, I think they call it. Yes, the Explorer in VS Code, and that will transfer data. Okay, so I want to read, there's a bunch of different files in here. So for example, suppose I want to read the house prices data. So there's a couple different files here in different file formats. So RDS and RDA are our data formats. PKL is a pickle data format that you can load into Python. And Parquet is a data type that you could use with either R or with Python. There's also a description file here. This is a markdown file. And so I can kind of see what's going on with this particular data set. But what I want to do is I want to load in this Parquet file. And I can't do that directly because it is a binary file. So what I need is a new file that will allow me to read this data in. So I'm going to click on this little icon up here, which is part of the Explorer tab. Click on this. And it's going to create a new file that I can just go ahead and name here. So let's say load data.py. Now, where did it put it? It put it inside of my data directory, which I don't actually want. I'm just going to drag it outside of that. So now I have my data directory and load data here. So this is a new Python file. So I can type in anything that I want in here, and you'll see it starts to do syntax highlighting. And so now if I want to execute this code, what I would do is right-click in this window and say Run an interactive window. So what that's going to do is open up another window inside of VS Code where the Python code is going to execute. So let's say run current file in interactive window. That's going to be the entire file. Load data.py. And it's executing. It's connecting the kernel and it's printing out. Now it's important to note here that I've got base Python 3.11.4. If it get an error here, it might indeed say that I've got the wrong Python version here. So for example, suppose I do, if I try a different Python kernel, that might not be the right one. I want to make sure that I'm using 3.11.4 because that's the main Python that's part of the RSM Docker container. There's other Python versions in there too, but we want to use 3.11.4 because that's what all the packages are available for. All right. So this is actually not something that I need. I'm actually just going to close the terminal here. Don't need that. And I'll just minimize the Explorer tab here because what I was trying to do was actually load some data. So load data, import pandas as PD first. That's going to be the pandas library that I want. You'll notice, by the way, that it's doing some auto-completion inside of VS Code. That is actually coming directly from Copilot. So once you have that activated, you have access to pro features as a student, you'll be able to do that as well. So you see that this is grayed out. If I now hit the tab key, it's going to complete that. And let's see what it suggests. It does a generic read CSV. Of course, it doesn't know that I actually want to load up a different data set. And what was the data set I wanted? It was going to be data and then house prices parquet. All right, so let's do house prices. Prices, again, it's trying to autocomplete to see if it can figure something out. And that's going to be PD read underscore parquet. House prices, what did it complete to? Just minimize this again. House prices parquet. Very nice. Okay, so it auto-completed to that. So now I can again run an interactive window, but what should also work is Shift Enter. Okay. Now actually it's not going to produce any output, so let me just do house prices, and you see that Copilot is suggesting maybe you want house prices.head because that's a method that's going to show me the first few lines. And so let's go ahead and I can select this and now press Shift Enter or right click and run an interactive window. Both of those will work. Wondering why pandas was sort of underlined here. So I had actually changed the Python version to 3.10.11 as an illustration and forgot to change it back. Just clear this. I'm going to run this file again with the correct Python version that actually has pandas available, and there we go. Okay, let's close this. All right, so that's just starting out with a new Python file. What about if I want to run R? Okay, so running R, there is nothing in here for R specifically except a bunch of different data sets. So why don't I go ahead and create a new file here? I'll call that load data.r, and I can do something here. So I'll go ahead and load the house prices.rds file. Let's do that. So I'm going to do house prices and then my little arrow. It's trying complete again for me. And so I'm not going to use that though. I'm going to do reader, read RDS, data house prices. Thank you for auto-completing that for me. And then house prices. Now, R doesn't have methods the same way that Python does. So here we're actually using the head function. So now what would happen if I try what I just did with Python and say, hey, run in the interactive window? It actually doesn't have that as an option available. So here's how I run R code in VS Code. First, I'm going to open a terminal, and that can be through the menu at the top or pressing Control and backtick. And I'm going to type R, small or capital, both of those will work. So now it's going to start an R process. Here I've got R running. Now I can go ahead and select the code that I want. I can copy and paste that over, but you can also use the Control or Command Enter key combination. And so there it's entered this code into the interactive R terminal and it's printed out some output for us. Okay. So this is a place to start with our R files and Python files. What if I want a notebook? Well, I can have different types of notebooks. So I'm going to open up the command palette. I'm going to say new Jupyter notebook, create new Jupyter notebook. And here's a new one. It's trying to detect a kernel. Let's say I'm just going to take this code from Python and just plop it straight into that notebook so I don't have to retype anything. So we're going to do that. Now, of course, it does need the right kernel. So we're going to take a check and see what's available. So I've got different Python versions. Again, I want Python 3.11.4. And if I press Shift and Enter or the Run button here, it'll start doing that. Okay. Okay. Now, let me just go ahead and save that file. So right now it's an untitled IPython notebook. So I'm going to do File, doesn't have that option. I'm going to go ahead and try to save it as load data Python notebook. Okay. All right. Now, what I'm going to try next is to see if I can also create a new R notebook. A new Jupyter notebook, but now I want a different kernel. So let's see if I can find a Python environment. There it is. There's an R environment that I can choose. So I'll go to my load data.r. Just copy and paste that code over here so I don't have to retype it. And let's see if I can run that as well. And there we go. So there's all kinds of different file types. I'll save this as well. This is going to be load data, but I'll add an R here so that I can distinguish from the Python version. Okay. And now if I just close these, I'll go ahead and close these. Here we go. If I just want to open these up again, I can just click at this, and you'll see that now it remembers, there's information in the notebook, it remembers what the kernel is that was used before. So I can go ahead and run that, and I get the same responses. Now there's one more I want you to see. I'm going to open up let's call this load data.qmd. So this is a Quarto markdown file, which is, if you've ever used R markdown before, it's very conceptually similar to that. And let me go ahead and grab something. So usually here you'd have a special header, but I'm just going to ignore that piece for a moment. You can specify different things, like, do you want to create this file into an HTML or into a PDF or whatever else. So I'm just going to say, example Quarto file, and I can put all kinds of text in here. So this is actually going to end up being a header of size 2. I can now create some text. Hi there from markdown. So this is what's called markdown, just regular text. Bullet. Let's say item 1, item 2. This is going to convert into an unordered list. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm combining text with code to signify which parts are code and which part are text. I use these blocks that are called 3 backticks, and then between curly brackets I specify what language I want to use. And you notice that as soon as I type that, there's a little icon popped up right above the backticks that I can execute the commands that I put in this cell. So I'm going to do print hi there from R, and I'm going to do another one, which is Python. So I can actually mix R, Python, and regular text all together in one file, which is kind of neat. So I'm going to say hi there from Python. And I'm going to run both of these. So if I click on the run cell here, this is R. It's going to try to execute that over here in the R terminal. Okay. Now, where is this going to get executed? This is an R terminal, so that wouldn't process, but it automatically knows where to go with this. So if I print run cell, it's going to open up the interactive terminal again, and it's going to say hi there, print from Python. Hi there from Python. Okay. So I hope that gives you an introduction to some of the basic things that you can do with VS Code and the Docker container, how you can start new files, how you can execute code, and if you have any questions, make sure to post them to Piazza.